surprised by this, but it's something about donkey furs, isn't it?
Yeah, donkey skins are quite valuable commodity, and
donkey skins.
Yeah, donkey skins, and this is basically a trade particularly driven by China, which is seeing a lot of working animals in Africa just disappear, being taken from different countries, smuggled out, treated very badly, and slaughtered into this trade. So the Donkey Sanctuary, which, as you know, is a big organisation in Britain, one of our most wealthy charities in the UK, because we care deeply about donkeys, does amazing work working with smaller organisations around the world. And it's been highlighting this trade for quite a long time. It's part of a much broader picture. I work with a charity called Born Free Foundation. We do a lot of work trying to draw attention to what goes on online in terms of the sale of animal products, wildlife products or domestic animal products. And there's little control. And often it leads to, pangolins being killed as endangered species and traded, for example, or donkeys being targeted in their millions and killed and slaughtered.
So donkeys are being stolen and trafficked then?
They are, yes, basically, because they're valuable. So, donkeys as working animals, as you know, are terribly important in most developing countries. Lots of charities like the Donkey Sanctuary in Devon support organisations, veterinary organisations on the ground. Other charities like the Brook are doing really good work to make sure those animals are kept in good, healthy conditions so they can work, but also have a good quality of life. But ultimately, they're being targeted as well. So across Africa, you have smugglers, people that will target donkeys and actually, basically round up donkeys and take them and move them out of the country to China, where they're going into the meat trade and going into the skin trade. And,
so it's very cool. And they're either used for their meat or they are used for their skins.
Exactly.
And it's a staggering number of
donkeys is huge, yeah. And that could sort of deplete massively the working animal population in developing countries, which is hugely important. A donkey to someone in Tanzania or Kenya in a small village community is basically their lifeline to keep everything going.
I can't imagine that these poor animals are being treated particularly humanely in the transit, nor in the manner in which
the animal welfare issues
killed.
don't come into it. So the reason that the Donkey Sanctuary is raising concerns here is that this basically is feeding an illicit trade in the smuggling and killing of a large number of these domestic animals, these livestock animals, in a way that is terribly cruel. So, they're drawing attention to it. And we care passionately about donkeys in this country. We part with tens of millions of pounds, Christo, for donkey care. Donkey sanctuaries are hugely popular and have been for a very long time in this country. I think we have a very special relationship with donkeys. I can't quite explain it for British people, but we love them.
Nearly 5 million donkeys a year are being killed in this horrific way.
Exactly.
But China has so much to answer for when it comes to their animal welfare.
Well, it sort of sucks things in. The problem with China is as a country, and it's not all the people, it's often the government and how it operates, and it's all the legality around the wildlife trade or animal trade. But if there's a demand for something in China, be it rhino horn, be it ivory, be it donkey skins, it sucks everything it can get, in terms of what's going on in places like Africa. So that's the real danger.
Yeah, but it also has a knock-on effect around the world, and yes. We saw that with COVID, and we've seen it with other stories as well. Okay, let's go back to what's happening here. Of course, there's been a knock-on effect on world events when it comes to this story, and that is energy bills. Now, the government are under pressure at the moment to try and implement some sort of windfall tax on energy companies. Now, I'm very sceptical of this. I'm against them doing this because I believe that once the government get their sticky fingers on yet another tax, when are we going to end up with a further windfall tax on various other things? There are capitalism, unfortunately, one of the drawbacks is that sometimes events will mean that you will have a windfall. You might make some money. And I don't like the thought of governments having their hands on that money, as tasteless as we might find it for energy companies to have made a fortune. But what do you say about this?
I'm sympathetic for a one-off tax because, windfall taxes have been applied before. The last Labour government applied them, and put it into various issues in social provision, and the health system and other things. So I think it can work, but you're right. I think it has to be done as a one-off, and I think industry needs to work with government and expect that there's a certain amount of provision they need to make if they have bumper profits.
But do you know what else was a one-off tax?
Go on, tell me.
Income tax was a one-off tax.
Yeah, I agree. It's a danger.
Do you know what else was a one-off tax?
Yeah.
Stamp duty in buying properties. And I don't trust it for a second. I mean, make them invest in infrastructure. Get the way to solve this problem, Dom, is not to tax the energy companies, is to make the energy companies invest that profit into green energy, so that therefore we can have a tax reduction on our green levies. Therefore, consumers are getting it off their bills rather than the government getting it in their pockets from the energy companies.
Yeah, I think the whole energy system's a mess, to be quite frank, and this is tied up with the war in Ukraine as well. My view personally is that I think we should cut VAT on fuel at the moment. We could cut a tax, and I think that would make a direct difference to people's bills. But the danger is that we are in a nightmare scenario that the government just aren't keeping up with. Families particularly are seeing their energy bills go through the roof. So you could be 1,000, 1,500 increase by the end of the year. That's a huge amount of money that you've got to find, and it's worse in some cases for other people, particularly on prepaid meter cards, which, as you know, are just extortionate if you're in a situation having to use one of those to heat your home. So that's a massive, massive problem. But at the broader level, you've hit the nail on the head. The whole energy system, we're in real danger here. I remember reading a book a few years ago called Lights Out, and you should find it. I'll send you a link, which was written and very well researched by an author, telling a story about the oil supply to the UK and Europe being cut off because of the Saudi oil fields and Kuwaiti and Iraqi oil fields all being destroyed by terrorist attacks at a time when Russia was in a sort of very unstable situation. But the fascinating thing is, if you research this, it's quite worrying. We don't have more than 28 days supply of oil available to keep our economy going if it was cut off. We have reserves, but those reserves only will be another month, and most of them are actually located on the continent of Europe. They're in Holland and they're in Belgium. Now, I wouldn't trust the Dutch or the Belgians to hand it over if they were struggling with oil. Now, what worries me about Russia is the longer this war in Ukraine drags on, and this is partly to do with the sanctions regime, how we can make it work, that, Putin will say, well, maybe if I can cause more instability, with the Hutu rebels, targeting drones at the Saudi oil fields, which we've seen already, they can attack them and destroy them. If I could disrupt the Middle East oil supply at the same time that I want to make Europe more reliant on my oil and gas supply, this whole thing could begin to fall apart. Now, people think oil, it's cars, isn't it? No, it's much more than that. It's all our heating, it's all our distribution, it's all our packaging, it's all our energy supply, it's cars, automation.
We need for various
Within weeks, our economy would fall apart if we don't have a constant supply of oil and gas. And when I say fall apart, I mean anarchy, because your food supply system would break down, your supermarket shelves will empty, you can't move because your car's gone, your electricity starts to go off. If it's cold in the winter, people start freezing. If it's really hot in the summer, you can't have air conditioning systems. The whole thing is a nightmare. And this book sort of painted a very scary scenario about it. But the more I look at it now, and I know there's lots of people in our security services and others who'll be watching this and thinking, we're in a very precarious place. So the only way out of it, as you quite rightly said, is we need to become less reliant on oil and gas. I do think nuclear power has to come back with a vengeance as well. And I think that means that people in the green movement that opposed it, because of Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Fukushima, need to be realistic and say ultimately that's one way forward.
I agree. Listen, the charity is the power of one. Really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks for taking us through some of the bigger stories. Dominic Dyer, broadcaster, animal welfare campaigner. Now, we're nearly at the end of our